Hey, what's up, YouTube? Springman back. I thought I'd make a little follow-up video to my last one about the codex. I know I spoke a lot about it, but it's just gonna be a short one. Just a few things that I encountered that made me think twice. But still, it's worth evaluating because I was at the GW in Kensington and I met a gentleman who was pretty much, he knew his shit about Tau, and we had a pretty interesting conversation. You know, I had bashed broadsides a lot in my review, but this guy brought up some points, basically about the new meta being very flyer-centered, and basically the whole conversation boiled down to which unit ends up getting the commander's support, i.e. the microchip, you know, all that stuff that gives you all the nice rules like tank hunters, ignores cover, blah blah blah. And he basically said, you know, he basically maintained if you stick the commander with all those goodies with the broadsides, they'll basically able to 1 or 2 shot anything on the map, you know, that's within range, which it will be, of course. And he's right. You know, to an extent, he is right. You know, anything that unit touches, especially flyers will just die from that unit. You know, if it ignores cover and has tank hunters and everything. My problem though with that whole idea is basically, because if you do that, you have to make the unit really expensive. You have to give them drones, all kind of stuff to keep them survivable, and basically you end up putting a shit ton of points into it, and your whole strategy basically relies on one unit that's incredibly immobile. That's the bad thing. It's broadsides. They're just gonna sit there, you know, probably get shot to pieces. You know, if you do that whole thing and put that many points and the commander in them, you might as well take a Farseer as an ally and fortune that unit every turn. Because at least that way, you know, they're going to have a better chance of staying alive. But even then, it's just so immobile. Like, one lucky charge, you know, one lucky charge by like a fast close combat unit, like, I don't know, Wraiths or something, you know. And that unit's going to be tied up, and, you know, for the rest of the game, if not killed. And that's it. You know, they've lost their whole purpose. Whereas, you know, if you've got the crisis team as your main, basically, you know, hunter killer asset, rather than, it's basically all about which is your hunter killer asset, your broadsides with microchip or your crisis suits with microchip. If you've got your crisis suits as it, you know, they've got the jump move, and if you've got Chassira, it's a 3d6 jump move, you know, and they've got stealth and shrouded, you know. So not only are they more survivable to begin with, but you have more leverage in terms of where you're gonna go and what units you can engage. You know, you can give each of them target lock. Like I said, they can pretty much engage anything within range. And the whole broadside aspect, you know, assumes that his entire army is going to be within sight, which isn't always the case. You know, you're always going to have that one like dickweed guard player that just like finds some like solid building or something and just sticks a bunch of artillery right behind it so that you can't target them. And they're basically just going to lob, you know, whatever shells he's brought, whether it's a Colossus or something, probably something good, you know, that ignores cover, you know, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So, you know, from my experience having played Tau throughout 5th edition, you know, this also assumes, of course, that you get that first turn of really good shooting off. You know, in which case, if you let's face it, if you're playing Tau with this new book, and you do get the first turn of and you get a good run of shooting off, more than likely you're probably gonna win, just because Tau shooting can be so decisive, especially with the new upgrades. But say that you don't, you know, and things go wrong. Like, in my opinion, you kind of have to have some kind of plan B. And you know, not only is the broadside unit immobile, but it's just sinking so many points into a unit that could easily be charged, could easily, you know, somebody could use psychic powers on them. like Ezekiel, you know, see if he uses him, could put the Mind Worm on them and just like start killing them. You know, it's 8b2, it ignores cover. You know, stuff like that. I don't know. He did bring up some really good points though, and apparently he'd won like three out of 3 games, you know, at some shop using this new list. I think it was like an 1850 list. Basically a super broadside battery that one-shots everything. But even still, you're not always gonna one-shot things. You know, you have to give them Skyfire, and that takes up their support slot. It also makes them really expensive. Tack on another 20 points for each one of them. End up being 85 points apiece. That's what, 255 units for them. That's without any drones or anything like that, which you'll want to give them. You know, then tack on the commander. You're easily looking at about a 5, you know, 4 to 5, maybe even 600 point unit altogether. And that's almost as much. That's pretty much the same as the Chasseur-Bone that I discussed. The only difference is that one is actually mobile. So say you've got like a bunch of guard tanks behind like a line somewhere, behind some cover that blocks line of sight from your broadside battery. You know, what are you going to do then? You know, you can't do anything. You can't move the broadsides. No way. So there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. And every time I brought up the idea of outflanking or deep striking, he basically said no, because he's discounting the idea of, oh, well, you know, you could fail your reserve rolls. And that is true. But I just think that it is true. I am going to say pretty much the entirety of the Tau meta with this book now is going to be about which unit gets the microchip, because the microchip and the you know, the command control node, the multi-spectrum suite, all those goodies, basically, which unit gets them. That's what the new meta is gonna come down to. And whichever unit that is gonna end up being your, you know, your badass, like just your killer ass kicking unit. But I don't know, man. I just really think that you'd be better off giving all that support to a unit that is mobile and can move around. If you're gonna do it with the broadsides, you might as well tack on a Farseer with Fortune. Keep him cheap. Just regular Farseer with Fortune. No Spirit Stones, so that they can at least reroll their saves. You know, at least make that unit all the more survivable. But still, man, I just don't. I don't know. I think I will say, you know, if you think of it that way, then yes, there is some purpose in taking broadsides, provided, of course, that you've got the old models, the one that have the small base they can actually fit anywhere, because the new base is way too big to make them tactically viable. But, you know, assuming you've got the old models, which if you're an avid Tau fan, more than likely you've got the old broadsides, just stick with those. You know, pop the commander with all the goodies in there. Give them a couple drones. I would stick a Farseer with them, you know, just to keep with Fortune, just to keep them safe. I guess it's up to your playstyle. I will say, you know, because it was pretty much the law of the land before with Tau, you know, just anything that you can see, pop, boom, you know, with your railguns. Now they're not as strong, but the tank hunters should help. I'm not gonna lie, the tank hunters would help. You know, with the microchip. Especially against flyers, that's going to do a lot of damage. But the thing is that even with tank hunters, say you're shooting at something that's armor 12, you need a 5-up to pen, you know? And even with rerolls, you know, it's not guaranteed that you'll get it. And if it's armor 13, it's even less of a chance. And if it's armor 14, the most you can do with that weapon is glance it. So even with those badass broadsides, if it's a Land Raider, all you can do is glance it. You know, that kind of sucks in my opinion. I don't know. It's definitely food for thought. I would love to encourage a discussion based on this, because I think it's going to be. I mean, this is the first conversation I've had with somebody, you know, about Tau, and it was pretty much the core issue: who gets the microchip? Essentially, is what the new book is going to be about. You know, and you know, it's worth thinking about. It really is. You know, I mean, I kind of bashed broadsides in my first video because just out of the sheer from a stats perspective, you know, like what their new stat line is, how much better or worse their gun is, and their gun is worse, but if you give them the right support, they could still be really deadly, especially as flyer hunters. And he seemed to be, you know, all his whole perspective seemed to be that of hunting down flyers, basically. And in that regard, yes, broadsides with Skyfire and the microchip support and the Spectrum Suite are going to be really badass. But, you know, it's a high price to pay, man. And I don't know. We'll have to see what other people think. I would love some feedback on this one. Just, you know, just to see, or if anybody has other ideas, you know, I haven't described here, you know, please, like, feel free. And I don't know, I just think it would be cool to get a discussion going. Anyway, that's it for now. Cheers.